Monday, June 21st, which means it's the This Is Believeland Podcast. I am your host, James Mastrucci, and like always, I'm joined by Jordan Cohen. Jordan, how you doing?
Hey, James, how's it going? It's going to be fun.
It's going pretty good. We're here to talk some more Browns. Like we said last time, each week get a little bit closer to more football content keeps coming out.
Yeah. Now we're getting to the controversial stuff that comes out too, which is the best part of that NFL offseason.
Oh yeah, because it's always a good talking point, a good thing to discuss. Right. Yeah, and before we get to the controversial spot, we kind of DM'd a little bit last week about Dave Giuliani, the Browns director of research, being on Kevin Cole's podcast. Can you tell me a little bit what happened on there?
Yeah. So Kevin Cole is an analyst for PFF, but he's done a lot of stuff prior to PFF too. I've talked with him briefly on Twitter a few times. I think he's a really nice guy and he's really intelligent. And this summer he's doing this whole series where he's trying to get analytics guys, but also kind of a variety of people in research and for NFL teams on his podcast. And so last week he had Dave Giuliani, who's the director of research. And Dave Giuliani, it was really interesting because the crux of the conversation is, listen, Dave Giuliani, you've done analytics for 15, 20 years. You've been in Philadelphia. I think he was in 49ers. He's been everywhere. What does an analytics team look like for the Browns?
Mm-hmm.
And Dave Giuliani was actually pretty open. And really, I mean, it's not dissimilar to what we've talked about on this podcast, where what he says he does. So he's a research guy now. So he's kind of higher level. He's a manager at this point, a director level. But he said what analytics does is at the start of the week, they frame here are the things we need to work on. Here are the things we're doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
They run it by the coaching staff. The coaching staff thumbs up, thumbs down. And then if it's thumbs down, if the coaching staff wants more stuff, they tell the analytics guys. And the analytics guys will get it for them. But what he said that's really important is he said, obviously it depends on the coaching staff, right? Some coaching staffs don't want to work with you. And he said, but Kevin is really open to working with us, and he doesn't always agree with us. And we know that. Our job isn't to call the plays. That's his job. And he has certain things he wants to do, and our job is to figure out what is the most efficient way to do that. And then we run it by him, and he said it's like a process, right? Oftentimes he will take that information and build it into the strategy he already has. Mm-hmm. And it's like a painting that you're working on as a group, right? Everybody contributes. Stefanski has the final say, but it's a process. And I think that's what you and I have talked about, right? I fundamentally believe the Browns have one of the best analytics staffs in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a good thing. Because when you listen to this, it seems like they really view their job is to complement the coach and the general manager, not to determine strategy for the entire organization.
And so that's what it kind of sounds like. It sounds like they're trying to work together. They're not trying to run the show. And I think initially when the Browns went back down this route of way of running their team, that was the fear, is what was going to happen, was that these people are going to run the show, because that's what happened last time, and it ended up in an all-out disaster. Luckily, right. It looks very, very apparent to everyone that not only are they not operating in that manner, it's just that this group of people that is running this operation is significantly better.
Yeah, and I think that, so you also made this point that people don't realize or don't discuss analytics like they actually are, right? Mm-hmm. Analytics are about finding competitive advantages at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. That can be statistics, it can be a variety of things, but you try to find the competitive advantage. And so you didn't get into this, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while, is that when you look at the Buccaneers in the playoffs, they ran duo every play, and they just took advantage of the small, not super strong linebackers, right? Because all linebackers now in that Seattle cover 3 shell are ostensibly safeties.
Yeah.
And the Buccaneers just ran duo all postseason. Everybody said Brady had a great postseason, and he did, but it was coming off those duo plays that then he could turn into play action, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things Giuliani was getting at without actually saying it is that, listen, if linebackers all of a sudden aren't strong enough to tackle running backs, and again, he didn't say this is my interpretation, then guess what teams are going to start doing more, right? They start running more. And the point is, like, it changes, right? Every year it changes. And I mean, Kevin Cole asked him a question about Baker, and he said, listen, like, Baker knows there are things he needs to improve on, right? He did a lot of things better, and he did some things worse. And so, to me, it sounds like they are part of both the coaching staff and kind of the general management staff. Again, design is a compliment and really looking at trends, which to me feels like the Kevin Stefanski hire feels like they hired a coach who was running a system where it looked like the trend was going to be successful because everybody's still in the Seattle cover 3 shell. And so if you run more, you're going to take advantage of it, right? The defensive linemen are no longer taught to be like these super kind of intelligent guys that read the field early on, right? And that's what they were not all that long ago. And there's still some like that. But now they're just designed to be space eaters. Well, okay, guess what that means? Play action. So I came away from that interview, again, like, this has been my feeling all offseason, that I started really worried, especially when, like, the Tack McKinley stuff happened.
Yeah.
But it really feels like this is a collaborative process where you have the football guys, the analytics guys, the guys that are just, like, invested in the Browns, right? All kind of working together to create. I'm excited. I was really happy after listening to it. It's also just fascinating. They talked about, like, if you want to get into football analytics, what to do and what not to do. And I mean, he basically said, like, if you're a dick on Twitter, that doesn't look good. Like, we look at Twitter, we look to find analysts that are showing their work on social media.
Yeah.
So don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
And be open. Which, so, yeah, I don't know. I came away really impressed. I thought it was a great interview.
And so, last week we discussed Andrew Berry and his podcast appearance, and after you kind of broke down for me last week what this Giuliani's appearance on the PFF podcast here was, I came away with the impression that we have a pretty good idea of how the team operates, and it's basically exactly what we've been saying the entire time.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, it's funny. I don't know this for any fact, whatever. This is just my gut. It feels like DePodesta's pretty still on the outside. I mean, you do have the director of research on one podcast, Andrew Berry on the other, and DePodesta's name not be mentioned once by either the interviewer or Berry or Giuliani. Just it seems like he may be not doing that much. Like, he's kind of just in the background.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how involved DePodesta's is in the operations of the team, because every time you try and get something out of him, he tells you a whole bunch of words, but they mean nothing. So maybe that's another reason why nobody wants him on, is because we've seen interviews and clips of him. He'll talk for 2 to 3 minutes, and you've come away with zero information whatsoever. Which, hey, maybe that's great in playing the the wars of trying to make sure no one knows what you're doing and keeping everything that you're doing internally a secret. But it makes for terrible content.
Well, and what's funny to me is, like, Andrew Berry went on and, like, on the Athletic show and straight up said, like, their strategy for extensions, right? Like, Andrew Berry said, like, there are things we want to see more from these guys. And he didn't say we're not going to extend them. He didn't say we are going to extend them. But he was very clear that, like, clearly if there's an extension, it's going to happen under the auspices of you still need to prove yourself. And this extension does not let you off of having to do that.
Yeah. And so,
I think they're sharing information. I don't know how. I don't know. DePodesta may have never been super involved, right? Like, we heard that story when they hired Stefanski, and that it was like DePodesta doing the pushing. And I mean, I guess to a certain extent that's probably true.
Yeah.
But it also, I don't know, it feels like there's probably more going on.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest here. When's the last time we've really heard Deep Podesta discussed outside of people trying to continue to push the guardrails? I haven't really heard him talk
and the
about all
Browns
that much.
literally said, like, Andrew Berry literally has talked about how they don't follow that stuff anymore.
Exactly. The only people that bring it up are the ones that are still trying to push the guardrails agenda, which is we discussed previously that they don't do anymore.
I mean, the Browns drafted a zone corner and a linebacker in their first 2 picks.
Yeah, you can set fire to that ridiculous document right now if you haven't already.
Yeah, I mean, it was maybe Jake Burns' podcast I was listening to today, and they made an interesting point, which is there's no reason in the NFL that these extensions need to be given out during the offseason.
Yeah.
Right?
We see all these other teams do these extensions a couple weeks into the season all the time. What was Mahomes' extension done? Wasn't that during the season?
Yeah,
I think it
was.
Was.
The middle. Yeah, I mean, and the point was like Wyatt Teller, right? There is no cost to watching Wyatt Teller play again, right? Watch Wyatt Teller for 3 games. If it's clear our offense doesn't work without him, then you give him the extension. Same with Chubb. Same with Baker. Like, if Baker comes out guns a-blazing in his first 4 games, then I get the idea that you probably want to extend him sooner than later because the cost of not is very, very expensive. Obviously, you have to see, like, think, is this, like, variance? Like, is he getting lucky on these throws or is he doing really well? But there's a reason why good teams do that. And it feels like that's what the Browns are doing. The only one I could see extended early is Chubb. But I'm not even sure if they're going to give him an extension. But if they do, I could see them getting it out of play early because it lets them kind of figure out their cap.
Yeah, Chubb, maybe. But everyone else, it doesn't really seem like it should be a priority.
Right.
But, I mean, that's just me. My mistake, by the way, Mahomes' deal was signed in July, but for some reason I thought it was during the season. Maybe it was one of the. Maybe it was like
during the season?
Maybe it was a Wentz or a Goff. Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
No.
One of them.
June 6th. June 6th for Wentz. It was somebody. I remember because it was just
Goff.
It was Goff. He was September.
Yeah.
Goff was September. I knew it was somebody with a big dollar figure.
Yeah. No. Right. I still can't believe how much Jared Goff is getting paid. Although I don't think he's as bad as some people do. To me, that's Baker. Like, his highs are really high, his lows are really low.
Yeah. That's about where he is. But as far as extensions go, I don't see a need to, like, if Browns Twitter ran the way the Browns re-signed people, they would have signed everyone to extensions back in like February. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm ready for tight end 1 David Njoku to get his max contract. So then we have the 2 highest paid tight ends in the NFL. That's something that's going around. Like, I've seen that a lot in like articles too. That like, not that the Browns think this, but that people that like write about the Browns think Njoku should be the number 1 tight end.
Which outlet?
I know. I've seen it like a lot of like the Browns blogosphere.
Oh, okay. So like,
and like the Athletic had an article about it, but it was basically it was not saying that they should make it, but that it's very possible that's what David Njoku's looking for before he signs a new deal.
Got it.
It's like he's not your number 1 tight end. I know. I get he improved his blocking towards the end of the season. Great,
and he had a quote unquote good end of the season in playoff games, which when you look at them, they really weren't impressive.
But people make this mistake where they think improvement's linear, right? So David Njoku will never have it's like the Baker problem too, right? Mm-hmm. Like these guys will never have games substantially worse than what they just did, and that what they just did is really the new them.
Yeah.
That's not how improvement works in any walk of life. It's not how improvement works for NFL teams.
I mean, this is one of my favorite terms to discuss when player performance, and especially guys who are not at a certain level of talent, and that word is outlier. Okay.
Yep.
An outlier, and okay, I had to pull up the Njokus. That somehow we always fall into the Njoku or Higgins rabbit hole, like most times on this podcast. But
sorry about Higgins, don't worry.
But pull up those stats. I know it was a hard game against the Jets. They were down everyone, but 4 catches for 26 yards. Then he followed up with 2 for 13 against the Steelers. Then the win against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, 1 for 7. And the loss against Kansas City, 4 for 59.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that good.
No.
I get the frustration about how much Austin Hooper's paid. I also get that Harrison Bryant does some things really, really well and then was still a rookie. He makes mental mistakes. But listen, Harrison Bryant probably is in a similar role again this season. And then next season, the hope is Harrison Bryant can be the number 1 tight end. The hope is not David Njoku.
No,
it's not.
It can't be. It honestly can't be.
And here's the thing. I think Njoku, if he's willing to take a cheap 2-year extension, that's fine. If he's willing to take tight end 3 money for another 2 years, great, re-sign him. Because that contract, you can trade him. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you can be willing to take that. And it's going to be like a Sheldon Richardson thing where the Browns think they'll, and this happens all the time, where they lowball the guy. It's not just a lot of teams do this. Assume the guy won't get a better deal and will come back. But then the guy's so pissed off, he goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, which is fine. Let that happen. I don't care. But he's not your tight end 1.
Mm-hmm. Oh, which, by the way, I'm glad you brought up Sheldon Richardson, so I'm going to take this moment to take a victory lap. Told everybody that he was not coming back. As soon as they used that phrasing of at the right price, I knew he was gone. So, victory lap.
Here's the thing. Imagine you're Sheldon Richardson, right? You came when this team was a question mark, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody was sure how the Browns were, and it was still pretty dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. And you played really well for 2 years.
Yeah.
He did. He was really... I can't think of one bad Sheldon Richardson game.
No, not really.
And then the Browns lowballed him. So, yeah, I buy Mary Kay Cabot's point that he went to Minnesota for less. Yeah. Sure. But it's a professional thing, right? Mm-hmm. If you're lowballing me, I'm not going to stay, no matter what, even if I have to take less money elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Listen, every team does it. I don't think it's a bad strategy because if it works out, you really honestly, it's not dissimilar to having with Clowney, right? Mm-hmm. For 2 years, we said, this is what we're willing to pay you. For 2 years, he said no, and then he said yes.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's issues with the Clowney bit of Clowney, but the strategy itself wasn't bad. It's the reality.
Yes. And to wrap up this whole discussion about Richardson and Clowney up, there's one thing that seems like the Browns may have as a tell when it comes to players that they're looking to try and negotiate with, who are or were part of their team. It's that when they say at the right price, that means we're not re-signing them. It's a nice little code phrase that they have. I think it's important to actually point that out because while it does give the general fan base some false hope, it's important for the people that are covering the team to recognize at the right price means he gone.
Right, and what I like about Mary Kay Cabot, and again, and I've said this on here before, I think she gets criticized, but pretty unfairly, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
she's
does.
Much better than a lot of the journalists we have in this city.
Yeah,
but she made this point over and over again. She was insistent that she did not think Richardson was coming back.
Mm-hmm.
She said it was possible, but it's unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm more speaking to the not the people that are at every press conference in person. So not like the Mary Kay Mary Kay Cabot, or Mr. Tony Grossi, who spends his weekends opening up Taco Bells.
Yes.
Which is still one of my favorite pictures of all time. Tony Grossi at the Taco Bell. But I digress. The next subject we're going to get to, Pete Prisco. Some people like him, a lot of people hate him in regards to his analysis, but he had a top 100 NFL players of 2021. The top of the list, not very surprising, Mahomes, Donald, Rodgers, etc., etc. We got Myles Garrett in at 9 on this list.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Pete Prisco's thing, and I don't have any issue with Pete Prisco. I think these rankings are awful, but I get why he did what he did, right? Like, each one of these spots is signaling to create controversy.
Yes.
The logic behind Myles Garrett is that he's really young, and the first half of the season he was really good. Here's the thing, the first half of the season he was going up against, like, backup left tackles, right? Like, don't forget there was all those injuries early on in the season, and yeah, he was playing great, but, I mean, I don't know. I know this is heresy as a Browns fan, especially given my Baker thoughts too, but, like, I'm not convinced Myles Garrett is, like, Myles Garrett, I'm not convinced is, like, the guy for a defense. And 9th overall, you have to be. Because a defensive end, at 9th player in the NFL, you better be the guy. Whatever defense you're on, better be top half of the league. And I don't feel that way about Myles Garrett. Like, I do with Aaron Donald, right? Like, Aaron Donald, I don't care where you put him, that defense becomes elite.
Yeah, it does.
Jalen Ramsey's another guy. Like, it's harder, I think, as a corner to have, like, a total transformative impact, but Jalen Ramsey shuts down whoever he's guarding all game long. And I just don't know what Myles Garrett does that.
I will say this, in defense of Myles Garrett, he is playing the defensive end position where Donald's playing the defensive tackle. While Donald is a better player, it's easier to disrupt the play from the inside than it is from the outside. Because you can completely just kill the timing of everything if you shed your blocker like he does, like, every single play.
But then why is Myles Garrett the 9th best overall? Like,
I can't defend him being at number 9 here. He's one of the best defensive ends in the league. I'll give him that. I don't think he's the 9th best player in the NFL.
I don't know. The rankings felt weird to me because some of those rankings, like the Myles Garrett, seemed like just based on, like, pure ability, not position specific. And then, like, ranking Chubb in the low 60s because he's a running back, which, I mean, I have issues with that too, but, like, there was not too much consistency, and I think that's part of what he's trying to do, right, is to stir up controversy.
He's trying to get people to talk about it, so mission accomplished, Mr. Prisco. So he had him at 63, and he's the next Brown on the list, which means from 10 to 62, there is not a single Browns player on this list, which I kind of agree with. I do.
I would have Chubb much, much higher, and I think I would have Wyatt Teller higher too. But
I'm not opposed to the big gap is essentially what I'm at.
Right. I agree with that. I mean, I guess what I would probably have Myles Garrett around 20, and I would have Chubb. I mean, I think Chubb's actually just better at what he does than Myles Garrett is, but I get the position thing.
Yes.
So maybe put Chubb 25 for me.
Okay.
And somewhere in that range. Like, listen, if for what Kevin Stefanski wants to do, I'm ranking Chubb in the top 10. But I get that's not what the purpose of this list is. It's not about what the coaches want to do, right? It's about overall. So Chubb 25, but, like, I don't think I would have any Browns player in the top 19. And after Chubb, I think you're hitting the 60s until Wyatt Teller.
Yes, so I'm looking at his list. The running backs on here: Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. For running backs, and let me see, still scrolling through, but outside of Derrick Henry, these guys do something that Nick Chubb doesn't really on a regular basis, and that's make an impact in the passing game. Derrick Henry's just a better...
he did towards the end of last
season. Towards the end of the season, but, like, again, could that be the outlier? Could that be the small sample size?
Oh, it absolutely could. But
Zeke Elliott was on here too, but he's closer to Nick Chubb. But those other guys outside of Henry, Henry is a better running back at this moment in time than Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
And he appeared in all their games, I think.
Well, that's what I would say about Derrick Henry, is that just like, and listen, Chubb had a weird injury.
Yeah.
He had been really healthy, surprisingly, before that. But I think there's an argument for Derrick Henry being a better running back than Nick Chubb, like just as a pure runner. I think that's fair. That's fair. I guess for me, like, I know Christian McCaffrey is a running back, but it's hard for me. Like, that offense didn't miss a beat when Christian McCaffrey was out.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think speaks bad of Christian McCaffrey. I feel like where Chubb is a very significant floor raiser with a modest ceiling raiser, I think Christian McCaffrey is a pretty low floor raiser with a very high ceiling raiser.
Okay, I can get on board with that.
And that's what I think about the Pats. So, like, if you were asking me if the Browns had Pat Mahomes, or that doesn't even need to be Pat Mahomes, next level down quarterback, Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
Right. Browns had Dak Prescott. Who would I rather have, Nick Chubb or Christian McCaffrey? I'm probably picking McCaffrey.
Yeah.
But the Browns don't, and like, that's nothing against Chubb. Like, again, I think there's a very realistic possibility in the next year or two Chubb becomes a better runner than Derrick Henry. But I at the same time, like, Christian McCaffrey, if you are a really good passing team, is like a Travis Kelce is for Kansas City. Obviously, a totally different position, but it's a matchup nightmare. So I don't really have an issue where I would have Chubb ahead of Dalvin Cook. And he was ahead of Zeke Elliott, who I don't even know. Like, Zeke Elliott being in the top 100 was weird to me. Like, Zeke Elliott hasn't had a good season in years.
See, just to touch on Dalvin Cook for a second, Dalvin Cook has had 40, 53, and 44 receptions the past 3 seasons, where I don't think Chubb has 30 in his career.
Yeah, no, I know. But, like, I just don't. And my guess is out of that 30, there's probably 20 past.
He has 72. I severely underrated his pass catches, but not a whole lot.
I think he's always had the potential to be good in the passing game. I think the problem with Chubb is, and this is the Derrick Henry problem too, like, you cannot convince me Derrick Henry in open spaces would be bad. It's that because they are so good at running the ball, using them as a pass catching option when you already have good pass catching options feels like a waste of resources. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I think that's logic behind it. Like, Derrick Henry could be an elite pass catching running back. He could. He could. You can't bring him down in open spaces. But no, the Chubb I would have. So I also think I just value running backs higher than Prisco.
You do.
Right. And so that's part of it too. Like, I would have Chubb. I probably would have Chubb ranked below McCaffrey, below Henry.
And I also think you're kind of looking at this from a little bit of a different perspective than he is. He's just looking at player not on the team. You're throwing some context into the importance of the team, which is fine. It's just a different perspective.
Right. Absolutely. No, 100%. I agree. And I'm not... again, I think I rank running backs higher, at least in the short term, than he does. I think long term, running backs I would rank substantially lower.
Yeah. And to that point, that brings us to Odell Beckham Jr. at 81. He's just here because of who he can be and what he's done previously.
And that's what Prisco said, I think.
Pretty much.
And again, the rankings are designed to create controversy, to get people talking. They do that. Yeah. It didn't feel like a super consistent, consistent set of criteria. But again, Odell Beckham 2 years ago is probably in the top 20.
Yeah, he is.
And so I get where he's coming from, right? Like, those it probably takes longer to fall from that than
it does.
So I get that. I don't have an issue with Odell. I thought that was a fair spot. Again, he clearly ranks offensive line and running back lower than I do, which
Mm-hmm.
is fine. It's totally. I mean, that's just bias. But
And speaking of offensive line, Joel Bitonio at 86.
yeah, I had no problem with that. That felt right.
He's a guard, so I'm like, okay, he's in the 100. He's a guard. Wyatt Teller, 96. Same thing.
Yeah. Again, two of the best guards in the NFL.
Yeah.
They're guards. Yeah, I have no issue with those.
So
what got weird was after that. Like, I was surprised. Denzel Ward's got to be a health thing, but like John
really
Johnson
does.
third. Yeah, I mean John Johnson the third. I guess Prisco did have him as borderline. Jarvis, like to be fair, those I get the argument that they're borderline top 100 guys.
Yeah, there's quite a few Browns on the list that aren't in the just missed category. John Johnson, Jack Conklin, Baker, Jarvis, and J.C. Treader all are in the just missed.
The
group.
one out of the stands out for me is Baker.
I don't think Baker just missed this list, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I Baker's in the top 150 for me, because after that you're getting to like bench guys, but he's probably closer to 120 than 100 for me.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, you see some of these other quarterbacks that missed the list here, because now I'm curious. There's a ton that made the list.
At this point, quarterbacks are like a quarterback that is average. I don't rank that's a cost to me because they end up with a huge contract.
Yeah, so the quarterbacks on the just missed is Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, which I feel is the right group of guys to be in the just missed. Compared to the guys that didn't make the list, where we had. I know you're not big on Joe Burrow, but he chimed in at 95. Kyler Murray's at 94.
Kyler Murray, I get. Joe Burrow, I don't. Again, it's not
Stafford, Ryan, Prescott, Herbert, Lamar, Watson, which his inclusion on the list is complicated.
Side note, did you see the Herbert to Keelan Allen stuff that was going around? That team's going to be good.
Yeah.
That team's going to be really good.
Yeah. So that was an interesting list from Pete Prisco here. Considering a lot of people have the Browns with a lot of good players, but I think the difference, and I think sometimes input from outside sources is needed to understand, I guess, how the team is perceived from outside of the area or outside the organization. Okay,
right?
Because sometimes that's second set of eyes. I know this list it's complicated. Let's put it that way, because that's what this list is. But it's more about having, how do other people view the team and the team's players? Because if you would listen to just the voices in unison on Twitter or through blogs or whatever, you would think the Browns have the greatest team of all time, and having that kind of sort of reality check, being like, hey, you guys got good players, but they're good, not great, or great, or not, or good, not elite. So I think that's important to distinguish from a lot of these players on this list, because that list, especially towards the top, that's like the elite, like all caps, elite players of the league.
Yeah. I also think it speaks to the perception is that Kevin Stefanski is doing a lot of the weightlifting here.
Yeah.
Water carrying here. Like, I think that's also because like Prisco's written about the Browns before and thinks like they are a potential Super Bowl contender. Mm-hmm. So I think this means that it's not. So first off, I do think people think the Browns have a lot of kind of this like second and third tier talent, just not really much in the first tier. Mm-hmm. But second, I think it also means that people just really rate Kevin Stefanski.
Yes, absolutely.
Which they should.
Yeah. And speaking of the coaching staff, there is one more topic we had on the docket today, and that'd be Joe Woods and size on the defense. You sent me an article appearing on Brown's Wire, which you told me before we started didn't use the full quote, which kind of...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Woods basically... So somebody asked Woods, like, was he concerned about the size of the linebackers? And he basically said no. And what he was pointing to is, like, we have really athletic linebackers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not like just having the speedy guys that Tampa just crushed all playoffs, right? Duo. Like, these guys are strong.
Yeah.
Right? John Johnson III is not the biggest guy, but he's an ox. He is so strong. JOK, he's not your like prototypical linebacker size, although he's bigger than people give him credit for, but he's really strong. Like, he's an ox. And that was Woods' point. Like, listen, yeah, they're not the biggest, but like all the other metrics they check out in, what is clear is I think he is worried about getting pressure, whether it's to stop the short running game or get to the quarterback. Because what do you say? Like, basically, you either commit a linebacker to rush, which takes one person out of the secondary, or you just try to use the defensive line to generate pressure. And I think he's worried about that.
And
which
that's
is
fair.
Understandable. To me, that's the biggest question mark on the team outside of Baker. Is that defensive line?
Looked up the sizes of Mr. John Johnson. 6'2", 209. That's a pretty big dude for a safety. And JOK 6'1", 215.
Right, which is again undersized a little bit for linebacker, but not. It's not like who's the guy a few years ago that got Simmons?
Yeah,
Simmons is just a safety. He's not a linebacker.
So I think on one hand there are certain areas where size would be a concern, which when you look at guys like Tack McKinley or or Clowney, mostly with what people were trying to say what the Browns should do with Clowney. Kick him inside, which was preposterous. That
size on the defensive line is a bigger concern for me than size linebacker, core, and secondary.
Linebacker and secondary, I'm not worried about their size all that much. It's... I mean, sure, would it be nice to have, some more bigger traditional size dudes? Yeah, but those guys are a little bit more rare to see in the starting lineup nowadays, just because of the passing game and how many teams, like, outside of a handful of teams running a form of the offense that the Browns run and whatever the hell the Ravens do offensively, you got to prepare for like at least a 60-40 passing split every game.
Yeah. I mean, I also think the Browns defense is it's funny, everybody's like, oh, it's designed to beat the Chiefs. I don't actually think that's true.
No, it's not, because nothing can.
Still pose they still pose huge matchup issues for us. But the Ravens, I think this defense is designed to stop, right? It is. This defense is going to be really good at pushing people to the side.
Yes.
And that is how you beat the Ravens. That is Lamar's weakness, because it means he has to throw the ball.
Yeah. It has speed, but they didn't necessarily go for speed in the sake of getting rid of strength. So it's not about just size; it's the strength. They're still strong players, so they're not going to be.
The Ravens are
pushed around. Really,
yeah. The Ravens got fixed their offensive line, right? So I think that is not unimportant. But I still, I think the idea here is well-rounded athletes that are really intelligent is what the Browns are looking for. And I think that's what they have.
Yeah.
And I think it's a defense designed to stop the Ravens, because what they realized is, A, to win the AFC, you're going to have to go through the Ravens. B, you have to play them twice a year anyways. So you got to be able to beat them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because... the Bengals still seem like they're a few years away. They could move into headache status this year. You're just kind of annoying team. Like, you still win, but it's just like, man, they're kind of annoying. And
Yeah.
who knows where the Steelers are going to go? I mean, yeah, they sign up for another year of Big Ben, and that team seemed to just unravel as the season went last year. But until we see them completely collapse, they're still the Steelers, one way or the other.
I mean, yeah. I think they're going to be worse than the Bengals. I think the Steelers are going to have a nightmare season.
I definitely think that's in the realm of possibilities, but until it happens, I'm not going to be like that's going to happen.
Fair.
You know what I mean?
Fair. Well, and they signed that new offensive coordinator who is supposed to be really, really good. He was the guy that did all that motion stuff at the college level. I always forget his name. But so, I mean, maybe they run a new offense out there and beat teams, but I don't know. That roster. Yeah. Yep. That roster to me is just like Swiss cheese. Like there are just holes every. And I know they drafted Najee Harris, but it's like your solution to no offensive line is to draft a pass catching running back. Like you have a quarterback that can't throw, so I get why you want the pass catching running back, but that offensive line's a nightmare.
Yeah. Listen, I'm not going to say Steelers are a perfect roster or they're a team that's going to, finish the deal that they started last year before they had an all-time epic collapse. It's just until they fall off the cliff.
Right.
Until they're done. Let me make this comparison. You're familiar with the Halloween movies, right? They're Michael Myers until they're dead. Sure. Until they're dead. Yep. You got to keep making sure because they're going to keep coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that team is so well run that. So what I will say about the Steelers is I think they are the least talented team in the division, but the consistency and that coaching staff and that front office also makes me think they will find a way to win games.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this because I think the Browns need to improve this season. I also do think the Browns may be able to win the division this year, depending on. It's going to be close, I think, because I think the Ravens are going to be incorporating a lot of new pieces. And that offense is not the easiest offense to incorporate new pieces into. It's very weird. Yeah. It's very unusual. And so I think they may start slow. They'll finish really strong. But it'll be like what happened this past year, right? They start fairly slow, and then all of a sudden they just explode. Yeah. I think it'll be close. I still – there are teams in there. The Chargers terrify me. The Chiefs terrify me. So the Browns, I think – they got to improve a lot.
They do, and
Bills scare me a little bit. Like,
yeah, the Bills are legit.
No, the AFC is really good now. The AFC is really good. I mean, there are teams like the Broncos that I know they don't really have a quarterback, but that's a really good roster.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if who their quarterback week one is? It could be who they already have on their roster. They could make a trade for Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, depending on how that whole situation sorts itself out. Because
right,
but the Broncos. It's never good to be just a quarterback away because that means you're not really in it in the whole to begin with. But they're a team that just seems like the phrase "a quarterback away" really applies to that team.
It really applies. Like it really. I mean, if you had Kirk Cousins to that team's a title contender.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the level of quarterback they need. If they had somebody like Aaron Rodgers, I mean,
if you are looking for a team to actually realistically compete with the Chiefs in the AFC West, it would be the Broncos with Aaron Rodgers on that roster.
Yeah. I think that Broncos with Aaron Rodgers, I think the Chiefs actually all of a sudden are the team that has to compete.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that. So right, I mean the AFC is really good. I that's going to be the problem for the Browns. I think getting the playoffs is going to be tough. I think once they're in the playoffs, it's going to be even tougher than it was last year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, the thing about last year is there were expectations, kind of, but not really. There were no real expectations. It's let's see how this all works out. Then when they started winning games, some expectations came on as the season progressed, but it wasn't entering the season with expectations, and I think that's going to be the ultimate, I guess, outside factor, is that they have expectations. And for some of those guys in that roster, it's expectations again. And it's how they're going to be able to handle that, how they're going to be able to manage that, and how is the coaching staff going to be able to manage that, because taking over the uncoordinated mess that the team was not an enviable situation, but straightening it, getting it to just a general state of not a dumpster fire, that was just, I don't want to say it was the easy part, but it was the less complicated part.
Yeah, it was a very different type of challenge,
yes.
Right? I mean, it wasn't easy. We haven't had it in 20 years, but at the same time, it's not the usual challenge a coach faces.
Mm-hmm.
And now this is a more traditional challenge.
Yes. And so I think it's going to be very telling early on in the season how things go for the Cleveland Browns. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up this week. You can always check out This Is Believeland Podcast on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and the audio files will be posted to my YouTube page as well, in addition to the website where they always show up every single week. Jordan, anything you would like to add as we head on out of here?
Nope. I'll talk to you. I'm sure we'll do another one soon.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have another one coming probably around next week.
Yes, sounds good.
Thanks for listening, everyone.